Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Eel-Russian Project Authority of August 6, 2026 to order. Thank you for your patience. I understand our colleague James Gore will be here shortly, so we'll get started, and the bulk of the agenda is really the presentation that comes a little bit later. And with that, I'll look to my colleagues for the approval of the agenda. Suppose we should do a roll call. We'll do a roll call just to make sure it's in the books. Here.
Here. Here.
Here. Great. And with that, we will move on then to the approval of the agenda. Again, looking to my colleagues for any questions, comments, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. And we can do a voice vote. That's even good. That's good. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. Hearing no opposition, the agenda is approved. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Two items on the consent calendar today, the minutes from our last meeting on December 11th, and a couple of insurance issues for the Eel-Russian Project Authority. And again, I'll look to my colleagues for any questions, comments, concerns on the consent calendar. And very quickly, before we take a vote on that, I'll just ask if there's anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to either our minutes or our insurance. Thank you for not standing up, and we'll bring it back and get a motion to approve the consent.
So moved. Oh, wait. Second. You got it. Whatever you want.
Yes, perfect. And with that, another voice vote on the consent calendar again, the minutes and the insurance as specified in the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. That does pass unanimously, 4-0 with all here. Moving on then to the regular calendar items. We have 5 separate items. The first one is to adopt a resolution of the Board of Directors adopting a fiscal year 26-27 budget. And I will turn it over to our Executive Director.
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. I wonder if we can get the presentation to come up. Happy to just go ahead and talk through the budget item. I think the budget itself was included in the agenda packet.
Yep.
So we can just go ahead and talk about that. While we're waiting, I'll invite up Abe Young, who's a grants and funded projects manager, fiscal manager for Sonoma Water. And he helped us prepare the budget. And I will let Abe describe some of the components therein, and then we can talk about a little bit about the master agreement that we enacted in May of this past year. So Abe, if you'd like to, and for those of you who have the agenda packet, this is the same budget, the single page budget that's in the packet. So Abe, why don't you go ahead and describe what is there?
Let's see, I believe you should be seeing the CDFW grant budget summary at the top. So it's broken out by each task, project management, engineering design for the new Eel-Russian facility, environmental compliance and permitting, and water supply resiliency planning. And this is just looking at the FY 26-27 budget, and the costs are essentially allocated through the life of the grant. And the board will be asked to approve a budget adjustment if funds are expended at an accelerated rate. As far as the revenue that we're looking at for the ERPA, we have the state revenue, which is coming from the CDFW grant, coming in at $2.9 million. And then we have $50,000 that's coming from Sonoma Water as a transfer. As far as the expenditures, we have the insurance premiums that I think Dave will be kind of discussing a little bit. Essentially, it is a insurance coverage through the special Risk Management Authority, and we're looking at about 4,200 for that. For accounting and auditing services, this is a cost that we anticipate will incur to obtain an independent audit through a third-party accounting firm. And we're looking at the client accounting services. That is the MOU that we're looking to execute with the ACTTC to have them perform some of the accounting services for ERPA. And then we have some bank charges that are related to maintaining a separate bank account that ERPA has, and then tying back to the grant budget that we were looking at, the contract services, which is composed of contract services costs for the Sonoma Water and IWPC Professional Services Agreement, as well as the master agreement that ERPA has with all the agencies. And then lastly, we're looking at the membership and certification fees. That is the Special District Association membership fee that we're looking at on an annual basis. That kind of summarizes all of our revenues and expenditures. I can take any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And one thing I wanted, and it looks like I think we are actually able to see this. I hope folks online can see it as well. This is what Abe just went through. What I wanted to remind the board about was your approval of the master agreement at the meeting we held back in December of last year. We enacted and executed that agreement on the 21st of May, and it describes how ERPA's member agencies can be reimbursed. It describes the kinds of expenses that are to be covered in the budget that we now have, thanks to the $8.7 million that was granted to ERPA by the state of California. So there are administrative tasks, grant applications, outreach, technical services, and costs for member agencies contracting services on ERPA's behalf, which has been the case for both Sonoma Water and Mendocino Inland Water and Power Commission. Things such as the staff expenses for my position as executive director, staff acting technical capacities, doing engineering, outreach, environmental compliance, and then contracting with consultants. And this master agreement specifically called out the agreement we have with Environmental Science Associates for CEQA, and some of the business planning that we're doing for the Eel-Russian Project Authority that I'll describe in just a few moments. So the actual recommended board actions are here. I can read them briefly. Adopt a resolution of the board of directors to approve the fiscal year 26-27 budget and authorize the executive director and the Sonoma County Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, also called out in the formation document for ERPA, to make expenditures and necessary budget adjustments. These are a couple of the accounting tasks that are next that Abe mentioned. So entering into a client accounting division agreement with ACTTC of Sonoma County for $12,000. The third action is also an auditing service and fiscal service, again, coordinated through ACTTC for $15,000. The fourth item is to authorize the executive director to enter into an agreement for outside auditing services in an amount not to exceed $20,000 for this current fiscal year in a form to be approved by county council. We don't have that agreement just yet. And then also the authority, the fifth item, for amendments to that agreement so that we don't have to return back to the board to continue those required auditing services.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, looking to my colleagues on the items before us on the approval of the budget and some of the other financial commitments, are there any questions of staff? It is very straightforward, and I do appreciate that. Director Russ.
On the where it says not to exceed, those numbers, are those just projections, or are those based upon solid numbers?
Not to exceed amounts, yeah, those are just projections. I think with the ACTTC client accounting services amounts, we were expecting about 12,000, but in case the costs do go up, they do bill by the hourly rate and the volume of transactions. So that's something that we're looking at to have some flexibility in terms of costs go back up.
No, that's understandable. If they do go over those projected numbers, then that would come back to the board?
Yes, that's correct.
And there's actually one of the one of the terms in the master agreement is the board can delegate authority to the executive director for spending up to $25,000 as directed by the board. And this meets those requirements. So if it exceeded that cost, that would be another condition to come back to the board and ask for approval.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions? Before we take action on these items, I'm going to ask if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak. Seeing no one rise, bring it back to the board. Is it we can take all 5A through 1 through 5 under item 4 on the regular calendar. And I'll look to my colleagues for a motion. Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and with that, we'll take a voice vote on this particular item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Please say no. Not hearing anyone object. That does pass unanimously. Thank you very much. With that, thank you, Abe. Appreciate the work. We'll move on then to the item 5, which is an informational item on the new Russian facility water diversion modeling analysis, the update and presentation. And back to you, Dave.
Please do. So I'd like to introduce John Mendoza. John is a very senior water resources engineer, hydrologist, modeler for Sonoma Water, and has been working on modeling for the Potter Valley Project, the Eel-Russian facility, for quite some time. He is going to show us an analysis that was first presented to the Mendocino Inland Water and Power Commission's board. He's made some adjustments to it since, and he'll describe his process. And this is, I think, something we'll continue to return to the board to present over time as the data become available. So, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Today I'll be discussing, as Dave just mentioned, analysis we've done with some NERF modeling results. And so to discuss the presentation overview, Sonoma Water has been modeling how transfers from the Eel River to the Russian River will be different than historical diversions as a result of the decommissioning of the Potter Valley Project and the construction of the new Eel-Russian facility. This analysis will continue to be refined and updated as new information is available, as Dave mentioned. However, this analysis is pretty complicated because comparing model results of the NERF facility compared to observed diversions gets convoluted, as there's been major changes in the diversion rules that have been implemented over the last 20 years as a result of the 2004 FERC license amendment, a transformer bank failure in the Potter Valley Project that has resulted in PG&E not be able to transfer water for power production, a seismic risk assessment that has reduced the operational storage capacity of Lake Pillsbury, major droughts, and multiple FERC flow variances that have changed the amount that has been diverted through the tunnel. However, with this analysis, the modeling analysis under the NERF rules, we have seen that there's water for diversion in all year types, even in drought years 2020 and 2021, and water would have been diverted in water years 2025 and 2026, the last 2 water years. And in general, the average water available to be transferred through the NERF under the water diversion agreement each year is similar to what we experienced with the 2004 FERC license amendment diversion operation rules. However, we would need more Russian River storage to maximize those transfers due to the change in seasonality. And I will show you what I mean by that. And the Eel-Russian Project Authority continues to lead the effort to design, permit, and construct NERF so that water can continue to be diverted, and design and permitting are currently 100% funded. And so just to continue on the changes we've seen in the last 20 years on these diversions from the Eel River to the Russian River, I created this analysis looking at daily transfers through the tunnel for different time periods. And so that is what you're seeing on the plot on the left. The line shows the daily average transfers for a particular time period. The time period is denoted in the legend at the bottom, And then the description of the time period has a corresponding numbered circle on the right side. So to begin with, these are daily average transfers that we've observed from 1922 to 2006. This period represents the post-Scott Dam construction, but pre-2004 FERC license amendment. And during that time, we saw an average water year volume of about 150,000 acre feet be transferred from the Eel River to the Russian River. The red line is now looking at the time period from 2007 to 2022, and this is the post-2004 FERC license amendment. And you can see we saw a substantial reduction in diversions during this time period compared to the historical period. Particularly starting in March, you can see an acute drop in diversions coming through the tunnel. And this resulted in an average year water volume of about 64,000 acre feet. So about a reduction of 60% on an average annual basis. And now the green line represents water years 2021 through 2025, where we saw major changes occur in the system. As I mentioned before, this is post-transformer bank failure, Scott Dam seismic risk determination, major droughts that all created the need for flow variances that FERC approved. And during this time, we saw an average water year volume about 42,000 acre feet. So an even more reduction than what we saw previously from 2007 to 2020. And now the orange line represents our best estimate of what we're going to experience in the near future. And we're calling this the post water year 2025 estimated diversions. And these are estimated based on rules that were included in the 2026 FERC flow variance that was approved. It's averaged over multiple historical hydrologic years. So this would be the average transfer we could expect in the near future before NERF construction. And that results in average water year volume of 38,000 acre feet. So pretty similar to what we've seen in water years 2021 through 2025. But as you can see, there's been some major changes throughout the years that have resulted in major reductions in transfers from the Eel River to the Russian River. And so it's been tough to come up with analysis to compare modeling results for NERF and compare it to past operations, because operations are changing and we're not experiencing the same thing we have historically. And so for this analysis, we are looking at two operational scenarios. Scenario one is what we're calling observed. And so these are just the observed reported values. So these are observed Eel River transfers, observed Lake Mendocino storage and outflow, and there's no modeling involved with this. The second scenario is NERF modeled. And for this, we had to look at Eel River assumptions. And so to calculate the amount of NERF that would be diverted through the tunnel estimated, we needed the flow at Cape Horn Dam, which is near where the NERF facility will be constructed. And this is calculated using reported and estimated values from Scott Dam, Cape Horn Dam, and Potter Valley project transfers, and estimating the flow at that location from these values. So they're basically calculated from observed values. The transfer operations are consistent with the 2025 water diversion agreement. And on the right side, you can see a table with some of the rules that are set in that agreement that determine how much of the transfer can occur at any time. And these rules were developed to allow transfers through the NERF while also being protective of some on life stages in the Eel River. On the Russian River side, we had the model Lake Mendocino operations. And so for that, we assume that Lake Mendocino is being operated with the 2025 updated water control manual. So it includes the FIRO operations. Also assume that we'll be operating with the Lake Mendocino storage threshold hydrologic index. And that has been included in our previous TUCPs the last 2 years. And that sets the minimum in-stream flow requirements, which are assumed to be consistent with the 2025 biological opinion. And the inflows and outflows for this model are assumed to be observed. So those are the two operational scenarios. And with those two operational scenarios, we are going to look at two metrics. Metric A is what we're calling diverted. So that is the total transfer based on Eel River condition. So for the observed scenario, that is how much was actually transferred, reported values. For the NERF model, that is based on the water diversion agreement. So it's not dependent on Russian River conditions at all. It's the total amount that could occur under the diversion agreement. Metric B is what we're calling stored. And these are transfers that can be currently stored in Lake Mendocino or passed through for downstream beneficial use. So not released for flood control. And the NERF modeling assumes a PVID future storage project. And this modeling, we're assuming a placeholder of 3,000 acre feet, which could be updated as new information becomes available. So with these modeling scenarios and metrics, first I'm going to present the last 13 water years of annual NERF transfers that are modeled. So that is scenario 2. And so I just pulled up a bar chart showing scenario 2A. So this is the amount of diversion that could occur through the NERF project based on a water diversion agreement. And this is an annual volume per water year from water years 2013 through 2025. And you can see there's a lot of variety. Since it's a run-of-the-river operation, it's dependent on the hydrologic conditions. So in wet years, you will see more diversions occurring through the tunnel, and dry years, you will see less. Now, if I add on scenario 2B, this is the amount of diversion that could be stored with the current storage capacity that we're assuming at Lake Mendocino and the PVID future storage project. And you can see that the solid blue lines now are constrained during those wet years by the current storage capacity. And to go through this plot and kind of guide you how to look at it a little closer, the solid blue line again represents the volume that is captured with the current storage capacity at Lake Mendocino. And if you look at the hatched line above the blue line, the solid line, that represents the amount of volume that could be captured if additional system storage is available. So with future storage projects, that water could potentially become a solid blue line. And to look at specific time periods, in drought years, such as 2020 and 2021, you can see that the hatched line is equal to the solid blue line. And that's because in drought years, all the transfer is utilized. There's no, with the current storage capacity, there's no additional transfers above that with the water diversion agreement. But if you look at a wet year, such as 2017, there are significant NERF transfers that will occur that could potentially be captured with future storage projects. An example of this is the blue line is around 30,000 acre feet of NERF that could be captured with the PVID future storage project and Lake Mendocino. But there's an additional about 50,000 acre feet that could have been diverted through the water diversion agreement that would be available based on Eel River conditions. And now get a little more granular, those are annual volumes. And now we're going to do a comparison looking at observed versus NERF modeled for the last 21 months. And so this plot shows the monthly volumes of all 4 scenarios. So I'll go through the scenarios again. The green scenarios are the observed scenarios. The hatched line is the observed diverted. So this is the actual reported diverted amount that went through the tunnel in the last 21 months. The solid green line is the amount that was stored in Lake Mendocino or passed down for beneficial use. The blue color scenario is the NERF modeled. And the hatched, again, is the amount of NERF that could occur, diversion that could occur under the water diversion agreement. And the solid blue line is the amount of diversion that could be captured with current storage capacity. So I'll kind of go through some of these things to call out. So if you look at the winter of 2024, 2025, that was an extremely wet winter. You can see that you got some really high hatched blue columns. So that was a result of high flows in the Eel River that would have allowed for high transfers of Eel River water through the NERF under the water diversion agreement. But you can also see those solid blue lines are a lot lower. So the storage capacity of Lake Mendocino was utilized pretty quickly since it was a wet winter, and all that water that could have been transferred to the NERF under the water diversion agreement was not captured under current conditions. However, that water could be potentially captured with future storage projects, so it's available. If you look at the summertime, you can see if you compare the green columns, compare the blue lines, as you'd expect, the green columns, which represent observed diversions, are much higher than the blue columns. And that's because in the summertime, the NERF transfers start to decline to zero as Eel River flows recede. And we'll see this every year. The NERF transfers in the summertime are minimal compared to observed because the observed have Lake Pillsbury to continue diversions during the summertime. However, in the springtime, the Eel River is highly productive and actually results in substantial diversions through the NERF tunnel modeled. And so you can see that occurring in these two springs. And then the springtime is also very important for Lake Mendocino because the FIRO space and the water control or the conservation pool, water supply pool starts to increase February 15th. And so we're able to capture more water for water supply. And so as that water supply increases, we're able to utilize more of that NERF transfer into storage. And so you can see starting in March 2025, or if you start in February 2025, does this work? No, I don't have a pointer. I'm sorry. But if you start in February 2025, you can see there's no solid blue column, but there is a hatched blue column. And that's because there was a lot of NERF transferred that was occurring that was not captured in the storage. However, in March 2025, the water supply pool starts to increase, and you can see that blue line start to creep up because now there's more capacity in Lake Mendocino to capture these spring transfers. And you can see that blue line start to increase and converge with the hatched blue line because all that water starts to be transferred into Lake Mendocino storage. And so the same thing occurs in 2026, and it just becomes an important aspect of the NERF operations is the spring diversions are able to be captured into Lake Mendocino due to the increase in water supply capacity. And this table is the same numbers that we show in the column chart, but just to give you an idea of the actual volume amounts that we are discussing. And if we start on the left side of the column, that represents scenario 1A again. So that's the observed diverted. So the actual reported amount that diverted through the Potter Valley project. Scenario 1B again is the amount of that observed diverted that was captured into storage or passed down for beneficial use. The third column is scenario 2A. So that's the amount of NERF that would be diverted modeled with the water diversion agreement. And then the last column, again, is scenario 2B, and that is the amount of NERF that could be captured into storage. And so to call out some periods again, just to show you some numbers regarding the spring capture of NERF, Lake Mendocino was able to store NERF diversions in the spring, and we saw two different springs. Spring of 2025 was a wet spring, and so we were able to see about 11,000 acre feet be captured from the NERF diversion in Lake Mendocino compared to 12,000 for the observed. And spring 2026 was actually a dry spring, but we still saw some significant transfers from the NERF project based on modeling results. And it resulted in about 15,000 acre feet being transferred that was captured into Lake Mendocino storage compared to the 9,000 we saw for the observed. And over the 21 months, we saw the NERF modeled was able to store a similar amount of transfers as observed. For the NERF transfers, this is for the total, is about 52,000 acre feet, while the observed, we saw about 56,000 acre feet. And if we look at the total scenario 2A, so this is the total amount that could be transferred under the water diversion agreement, there's about 125,000 acre feet of transfer available if the system storage was able to utilize it. And just to kind of show that it's difficult to do this comparison even in the last 21 months, and how our conditions are even changing today. Just looking at the last 2 years, we saw different starts to the FERC flow variances that greatly affected the amount of observed diversions into our system. For example, in 2025, the variance wasn't approved till August 2025. And so, and then in 2026, we saw that variance be approved in May. And so you can see that basically from May 2025 through July 2025, we saw about 7,000 acre feet per month of transfer. While in 2026, since the variance was approved quicker, we saw about 3,000 acre feet. So over a half reduction in observed transfers. And we're expecting the variance to be approved around the same time frame of this year. So I think May would be a good assumption of when we'll start seeing those reduced transfers. And some key takeaways, NERF transfers could occur every year with the modern results. In the last 13 years, the annual NERF transfers range from about 18,000 acre feet in 2021 drought to 86,000 acre feet in 2017. And over the last 21 months, the NERF stored transfers are similar to what we saw with the observed transfers, so which was about 52,000 acre feet with the NERF modeled versus 56,000 acre feet with the observed. And again, there's significant benefits that could be gained from constructing additional storage in the Russian River watershed in the last 13 years, not including drought years. So these are years we saw surplus diversions occurring with the water diversion agreement over what could be stored. There was an average about 40,000 acre feet per year of additional NERF transfers that could be utilized with additional water supply projects. And this analysis will continue to be refined and updated as new information becomes available, because we're kind of experiencing this transition phase. And so we want to provide the best information possible. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate all the work and the report. I'll look to my colleagues. Director Gore.
A lot there. I think that it's appreciated first and foremost. It's obviously it's tough to get some equivalence when you're looking at a 21-month period versus an annual. But ultimately, the story that's being told is that I'm just trying to encapsulate what I'm seeing with the numbers, and we're all seeing with the numbers. We know what the past was. We know about the 150. We know what the near past was with the 64. We know what the current status has been, even though it's an average, as you say, of like 42,000, but it's been up and down with volatility with the droughts. It's been all over the place. It's tough to assume an average based upon that when we were in such a volatile environment. Now with what you're going forward, 38,000, then if we take 52 to 56,000, we do it over 21 months, we're still below what that 38 would be where we're now from now to ERPA. But the biggest thing is that ultimately everything is dependent upon achieving more storage, right? So, the conclusion of all of this leads to one thing, which is that delta between what's able to be stored, even with FIRO at Lake Mendocino, even at Lake Sonoma with FIRO, but like these floodmar projects, anything still even above ground, strategic locations, whether it's Potter Valley or Cloverdale or North County, we think a lot about Alexander Valley, other places. We got floodmar projects, other things. So if that's kind of where this conversation is ultimately going to lead, I know there's already been a lot of exploration of storage potential, even at a high level, or discussion areas of it, whether it's Potter Valley has done and looked at certain things. There's been conversations all over this. Can you talk high level right now through storage options and say, even though we've already embarked, different agencies have embarked on a lot of those, what this really means for the next 10 to 15 years of work, of climate bond money? Obviously my mind's going through what are we ultimately going to be spearheading, whether it's through ERPA or through other agencies, to be able to take as much of that delta as possible that still runs out the estuary.
There's a lot there. I'll take it first from the perspective of Potter Valley itself, which of course will experience this seasonal drought. If there isn't some way to try to capture water or use water differently in the Potter Valley itself, Sonoma Water, through the Department of Water Resources, hired an engineering firm to look at some ways that reliability can be increased in the Potter Valley itself. Some very good recommendations came from that work. One of them is conjunctive use. It's the use of groundwater. That has to be further investigated. It's improvements in water efficiency. It's the development of ponds for storage. It's potentially the development of tributary storage in larger reservoirs. That work is primed now to go to the next phase. Some of the money that we receive from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will be put to that purpose, led by Inland Water and Power Commission, Mendocino Inland Water Power Commission, trying to take those studies and see if some production wells can actually be produced and demonstrate the value of the groundwater. Also, Lake Mendocino and its reliability. As John just presented, there's tremendous benefit in increasing the storage capacity of Lake Mendocino. Again, Mendocino Inland Water Power Commission has taken the lead in a feasibility study with the Army Corps of Engineers. There's money available through the ERPA grant from Cal Fish and Wildlife to contribute to that work in a pretty substantial way. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to facilitate the movement of that feasibility study. And then there's work that isn't being specifically addressed by ERPA or its member agencies that's needed further downstream. You mentioned Floodmar. I think looking at ways of using water more flexibly, wintertime water that's available now through the releases at Lake Mendocino to recharge groundwater, to store water elsewhere in the Russian River watershed are ideas that the community beyond the direct work of ERPA needs to engage with us on. I mean, ERPA is getting that water to continue to flow through the tunnel, which is the most important part, to not lose that source. But being able to take maximum advantage of it it involves many stakeholders in the basin. We've provided some seed opportunities for that, but there's lots more that needs to be done.
Well, I think a part of what we as a board, even when I say the royal we, as I'm cycling off at the end of this year, if we're going to look at our communities of interest, our impacted communities, we're obviously going to have to look at prioritizing investment in areas that are going to be the highest risk. And I mean, we know what many of those are above Lake Mendocino with Potter Valley specifically. But that means that we're going to have this consideration of how do we not like compete against each other for like Sonoma getting money for down south when we need to prioritize applications and things that go to specific areas. You know, for me, I vote, one of the things I go back to past conversations with, even like Jay Jaspers, you know, when we were talking about Cloverdale and Cloverdale Basin areas, is that you have the so-called unconfined aquifer, but, you know, the mapping out of those areas is, as you say, with conjunctive use, are you going down more than 250, 300 feet and going into a lower aquifer? And are you using that water and then injecting back into it with additional water at a time? Is that, because that's basically in some ways what we're doing with aquifer storage and recharge out in Sonoma Valley. And in places like that, we're using old production wells to retrofit to put water back down, right?
We have some test wells to demonstrate that here in the Santa Rosa Plain as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, there's a lot there, but I would just say as a part of the ERPA plan, I think that, you know, really identifying not just the general large landscape, but isolating and talking about those specific areas, like we would say, you know, Potter Valley specific, north of Cloverdale, in between there, and you know, I mean, yes, I would say even Hillsburg and others, but I'm really thinking about not Alexander Valley specific, but Cloverdale, Geyserville, where they're really dependent upon the river flows specifically. I think that has to be put. I mean, I would be hoping that we would say these are the most at-risk areas. Ultimately, we're going to develop some project lists that are long-term projects and start scoping those out as funding comes available and other things. That's for me, is because you can't just expect that Lake Mendocino is going to be that, you know, all of a sudden a $500 million check is going to come in. I have one other question, and I apologize, but but it's more about something that's always come up, and it's in the meantimes. Okay, so we're sitting here, and there's political battles going on, there's organizational and process battles, there's things we read about in the paper, there's meetings we're involved in. But right now with PG&E, so I say in the meantime, PG&E still has its submission in with FERC, it's processing. We read about things about interventions. So that's not the right word, but I think it means the same thing. With other authorities trying to enter into the discussion process. In the meantime, so PG&E has some kind of infrastructure issues like they've had in the past, whether it's in the tunnels or otherwise, and this thing stops flowing water. Aren't they still required under their FERC license to invest into the project to continue flows going? To keep the water flowing, isn't it not just their right to utilize it, but they have to continue those waters flowing at least in-stream minimums? So they'd have to reinvest back into the system, even if it failed and they don't want to?
So they have to adhere to the
That was
terms.
a long question. I really
Well,
apologize.
no, it's okay. They have to adhere to the terms of their license. So they have to maintain the flows that FERC and the regulatory agencies demand.
Mhm.
You're talking about something catastrophic to happen that would prevent them from diverting at all. That's a question I actually don't have the answer to. But I know that they are working on annual licenses right now, requesting variances to try to balance the needs of the decreased storage that they feel is necessary for the seismic safety concerns to be mitigated at Scott Dam. They are not generating power, so the failures of their systems in the powerhouse itself have led them to be diverting that water, and they're diverting that water at a lower rate. They're also trying to balance some of the environmental concerns on the Eel. They have a longer term variance that they have applied for that they're stepping through the environmental compliance process for right now in conjunction with the National Marine Fisheries Service and other regulatory agencies that we believe will be more like the current operating conditions on the annual variances that we have seen. So until there is an order from FERC and there's a direction of exactly how to proceed and the surrender decommissioning, they will continue more or less as they have now, barring some catastrophe that would prevent them from diverting. And I honestly don't have the answer to that eventuality.
Great, thank you. Director Polly.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
First, I want to thank John for all the work you and your staff have done to come up with this. I know it's been an incredible effort, and it's been an ongoing for quite a while, and we've been asking for this information because it's really important for how we go about making decisions moving forward with regards to storage and looking for funding for the work that needs to be done to find what is available for us on that front. I will just divert for a second on the current variance that's in place right now this year. I think it's what we can expect to see moving forward. I think we've got this dialed down pretty well right now on the trajectory we're on at this point in time with PVID going on the demand request for flows. It looks like we're good for the rest of the season. And after the PVID irrigation system ends on October 15th, there's going to be a 25 CFS diversion with a buffer that's going to continue through the rest of the season, which will be very helpful to Lake Mendocino for this year. And it looks as if that's what we're going to see moving forward with the existing license. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's what we need to deal with at this point in time with the restrictions placed on PG&E at this point in time. So I think there's some good news there. With the issues that James brought up regarding storage, and this is our critical path right now. If we're dependent on just water that's going to be able to be diverted in the winter, and we know that there will be sufficient water that we will be able to divert from the Eel under your modeling results, storage is absolutely critical, and all of our efforts need to be focused in that direction now. There are efforts underway and have been underway for the last several years and we're getting more funding. We're looking for more funding. We have the chance of some funding that's available that we believe is going to be available for us, which is important. One thing I think that we forget sometimes is that with Lake Mendocino storage, if we could maximize that, one very important thing will occur, and that will be having carryover storage from one year to the next, which we currently don't have with the capacity of Lake Mendocino, even with the project working at full capacity prior to 2004. We were good then, but there were times when we had back-to-back drought years where we were vulnerable. So if we could actually increase storage in Lake Mendocino to a point where we could double its gross capacity, that would take care of a 2-year drought for us. And I think folks just don't think about that sometimes. So there's all kinds of possibilities with regard to storage. And is it going to be simple and cheap? No, but that's where we need to put the energy right now. And that's where our groups have been working really hard at this point in time to get there. So thanks again, John. This is really good information for us to have.
Thank you. Director Klein.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was very succinct, easy to digest. Question, since this wasn't made available to us prior to the meeting, will this be posted online for the public to also review?
Absolutely. In fact, John is the star in a video, so it is best to have the presentation not static, but actually allow him to do as he did today, step through it. So we will make that available. Our communications folks are working on that now, so that you'll be able to go to a YouTube channel and watch Sean give this presentation. And certainly this information will be published on the ERPA website.
Great. Thank you very much. And then going off the comments from my colleagues, it really boils down to this doesn't work without additional storage. And Director Pauly mentioned, we are going to have to pony up and pay for some of this. And just, we've received some startup funding from the state, the funding from Department of Fish and Wildlife recently, which does include some of that initial work for storage. But, do you see the state understanding from what we are sharing with them, the need for storage? Do they understand how pivotal storage is to this plan?
Certainly the folks that we've engaged with, and we've been working very closely with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in particular. And now we are also making an application to the Coastal Conservancy for some of the monies through Prop 4. They definitely understand that. We've also made appeals to the federal government to step in and help. We really need this region to be infused with some additional resources and capital to make some of these, as Janet mentioned, expensive ideas come to fruition so that we can maximize the benefit of the NERF. The NERF does provide this critical reliability in Lake Mendocino as well. So it is enhanced and maximized with additional storage, but even the diversion adding to that reliability in that Lake Mendocino, the alternative being no diversion at all, which would be a perpetual drought and a very severe condition at Lake Mendocino. I think all the government agencies understand that the NERF and companion storage are what is needed to replace the loss of the Potter Valley project.
Thank you. I appreciate that from a staff perspective. And of course, don't expect staff to be the one carrying that message forward, but all of us, that's what we need to be focusing on, is making sure that the message is received.
I have a question too.
Director Russ.
So I just wanted to follow up on some of the, I know that was a very long question by Director Gore, but one of your answers toward the end there was that it depends upon, to look at a path forward, it depends upon what's FERC's orders that are coming out. Do we have any idea at all when those orders are going to come forth?
The very easy answer is no. We do not have a time. FERC doesn't provide a timeline, and they aren't statutorily required to follow one. We have some guesses, and somewhere in the early 2030s timeframe is what's been guessed based on other proceedings, but it is entirely in FERC's hands in their jurisdiction.
Also, with respect to or regards to PG&E, I know one of the issues that Director Gore brought up was that because of their licensing, are they required to, even though they don't want to, won't want to, because they're shutting things down, would they be required to put money back into that project to help assist with some of this other stuff that we're talking about, some of the other studies that would need to happen?
Not as a requirement, as my understanding. They have to make sure that they can continue to meet their flows as they are dictated now. So were they to need to make some changes to at least preserve the current level of flow, I think that would probably be incumbent on PG&E. But in terms of their ability to contribute to these other efforts, can't speak for PG&E. I'm not aware of a requirement for them to do so.
So I raise that point because I think it's an important one, because in the past PG&E was reluctant to put any resources towards any part of the shutdown, or looking at, are things going to just come to abrupt end or whatever. So it's kind of disheartening to know that if they're not, I mean, if we knew that they were reluctant to do that, to put resources towards this project, and that would be helpful to ERPA, moving forward. And anyway, I know there's not really an answer to that, but that you guys can answer. But anyway, and I also want to just thank you guys for your work too. This was a lot of stuff, and to kind of digest, it's going to take me a minute to kind of go through it and kind of figure out what it actually is telling us. But anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Gore?
Yeah, just a couple other things. So with, I just wanted to ask based on that question with FERC. So with what was recently determined and what we heard about and got briefings on and read about, we don't know of anything else in between now for processing in between now and 2030. Is there anything else we're waiting for in between? Can you just give us an idea of like anything we need to submit, anything that they're coming back with?
So the milestone that was just passed was, and it's still actually ongoing, the time period was extended for comments to the
Correct.
NEPA scoping process. FERC will send out a notice when they actually begin that formal NEPA review. So we will hear from FERC at that time. I don't believe that they're required to provide status updates for how their NEPA compliance process is proceeding. But once that is done, there is a public review period for their findings, the results of the NEPA document, an EIS, so a very public process of comment on that document. So we will, and that all precedes their ability to issue an order that outlines exactly how PG&E is to proceed with the surrender of the decommissioning. So there will be, between now and the time the order is issued, there's definitely more public process and there's more interaction with FERC.
Okay. A technical and then more of a question for the board. The technical side is, do all of the determinations about how much water is available for capture if we had storage, is that all dependent upon also us ensuring our in-stream flows out to Jenner and out?
Yes.
Right? Because we can't take all the water. We have to keep water that goes out of the mouth at
It
Jenner.
assumes we're meeting in-stream flow requirements as determined in the biological opinion that was just approved.
And the biological opinion, the new one, does not require us to manage the estuary in the way that it was before. Is that correct?
It requires a change in the adaptive management of the estuary.
Yeah.
It is prescriptive. It's what we proposed as a modification for what was mandated in 2008. There is still active management of a lot of the same elements in the Russian River watershed that were considered in the 2008 biological opinion. It's a continuation and a refinement of those same requirements.
So this is more of an open question, which is, I don't know if there's an answer right now, but it's more of who. If we know where there's more storage needed, I mean, in one side, maybe it would be good for us to make sure that storage is a part of our bylaws, our resolutions. As much as you're having conversations as staff with coastal Conservancy and on Prop 4, maybe we sign some things. I mean, every person who's engaged on this, I think that's one thing I think would be appropriate to figure out how we do this with you. I think the reason I say that is that it's like, who's going to go after the storage stuff? Is it now ERPA, or is it your district, or is it Sonoma Water, or are we going to jurisdictionalize it? I don't even know if that's a freaking word, right? But I mean, if we're going to agree that we're going to go, that the number one goal is to go after storage to be able to pull this in these areas, then I think there's also some prioritization that has to come back with our counties going after projects and what we're doing, what we're going after for Prop 4. Because, like, am I going to go and work with the County of Sonoma or Sonoma Water or with ERPA to go after storage in the future? And I would say that I think if it's related to ERPA projects, we might want to think about our jurisdictions combining and doing it through ERPA. That's just one thought.
Well, I would just make a quick comment if I could on that. It seems to me if ERPA is going to be the entity that owns, operates, manages, and funds this project moving into the future, it needs to have the ability to find a way to fund itself. Having storage allows that to happen in a sense. Without storage, you can't ask people to pay for something they don't have. I mean, that's the simple but basic bottom line. And so as a region, I think regionally we should be looking at working together to find storage. Obviously, individual entities are going to have to work on smaller projects. Potter Valley is unique, but we're at the top of the watershed and what's left of this watershed. So I think improving storage in Potter only helps everyone downstream. Improving storage in Lake Mendocino helps everyone downstream of Lake Mendocino, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it needs to, in my mind, I can't imagine doing it in not a regional way.
Director Klein.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation, and don't want to curtail it in any way, but would ask that we actually agendize this for a future discussion. We can have time to have that consultation with our individual agencies and bring some ideas forward, and then also ensure that each board member is apprised of what's currently happening, what IWPC is working on, for example, so that we can be partners in that messaging and just all be on the same page. So.
And I appreciate that very much. Thank you, John. First thing I was going to do is thank you and Dawn for all the work. It was great to see that. And I think it's been, I was going to ask a big question in terms of all the work that's been done to date on the storage feasibility and whatnot. This is obviously coordinated with that. Were they using other numbers and how do they mesh?
Talking about the
I guess what are the
feasibility study
numbers for storage that we're going to design to going forward?
This is unrelated to that. It's its own analysis. I think Janet probably has more.
Yeah, no. So there is not a direct connection between what John presented and, for example, the feasibility study at Lake Mendocino. That process, I think Janet could speak to it much better than I can, is just really starting, and there is no alternative identified through that process yet. I think folks have imagined that the total authorized height of Lake Mendocino, an increase of 36 feet, would capture a lot of these diversions that John described. In fact, we know that is the case. But it is not, there isn't a particular target from that feasibility study that is being coordinated with the analysis that John just showed. There is an assumption in some of what John showed about, an amount of water that could be stored in the Potter Valley right now. It is less than we think is possible with the build out of more infrastructure and taking some of the ideas in that Jacobs report that I mentioned much further. It did not assume that there's storage that doesn't exist right now. It's very conservative that way.
I guess what I'm asking really, though, is what I've heard from my colleagues is that just that coordination with what has to happen with storage. I mean, what we've always known is that our work here at ERPA and the NERF itself is just one small cog of a larger as with everything with water, it's all interrelated. So of course I would say FERO was an important component of starting all this. And that had AQPI, and we have the NERF through ERPA. Storage is going to be massive. And I do think that, and I know perhaps you could touch on this in your report in a little bit, the business model going forward, to the point made by my colleague, our vice chair, the storage, the ability, ERPA's role in that, how does that, I look forward to having that discussion as well. There's going to be a cost to this entire endeavor. How do you monetize it, and who's paying for it? And I agree, they're going to have to be paying for a commodity that's going to have to be stored over the course of time. And I just want to make sure that we're coordinating as best as possible, because right now it seems like there's all of the different color race cars on the track moving forward and at different rates and different speeds. And, we want to keep pushing forward all together and collaborating, coordinating. And my first question is really just even about the storage goals that I'd like to understand further, the Potter Valley versus the Lake Mendocino versus either further downstream. And yesterday I was in here with LAFCO talking about a district in Alexander Valley, and to me it's all kind of interrelated and needs to kind of all be looked at in a big dashboard type way. And I just don't want to miss out on just I think we're probably all on many different boards that deal with many different things, but bring it all together and coordinate it is always going to be so important, even if it's just reporting back about where we are and making sure we're connected. Yeah, and that's probably less of a question, more of a comment at the end of the day.
I'll say information from this analysis could feed into those other analyses as well. Yeah.
And there is a bit of work that speaks to the demands, the needs in the Potter Valley itself, and that is that Jacob study. And so we are taking that as the starting point for jumping off and making more investments above Lake Mendocino. And as John mentioned, the demands below Lake Mendocino are accounted for in the modeling that he's done that considers how much water can be retained and stored. So there is some consideration there. Lots more work to coordinate among our agencies and with stakeholders throughout the basin for sure.
Great. Appreciate that.
I'm
sorry. Yeah, Director Russ.
I just wanted to mention to the board and to everybody that, kind of one thing that kind of defines itself is the water diversion agreement in terms of working together. So we've already made commitments that we would work with each other and combine our resources, like, speaking to Director Gore's comments, combine our resources and look at, that's why it's called the two basin solution. They're very interconnected, of course. So what's going to affect one is going to affect the other. So the tribe has been willing to reach out and look at, like, one of the things that we supported, and I think we actually wrote a letter to that effect, was that we supported that if the Coyote Valley Dam was looked at being raised, that we would, jump on board and support that. There's other things moving forward that we would support too, in terms of just working together. But also it kind of puzzles me that, we've had these discussions about storage when we first started having those discussions, when our 5 partners came together 5 or 6 years ago. And so it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that that's on the Russian River side, that's a huge issue, that needs to be discussed and studied and figured out, how to support it. But anyway, that just as a reminder, that was talked about years ago. And so I think it's really relevant now because that's coming to the forefront. But anyway, but I think that just with the WDA being signed by all parties, that's an avenue that we're all working together. That's my interpretation of it anyway.
Well, John, very much again appreciate that. We'll go ahead and I'll open it up for any public comment on this particular item. No one coming forward? Oh, there's someone.
Mahim. Oh, where do I
You could
Turn-
raise that whole thing of the button on there.
Oh. turn this one on here?
That raises and lowers.
Hello? No?
control of the microphone there.
Do I have, is it on? Okay. Mahi Kanema, Nicole Anna, Round Valley K Anna. My name is Nicole Whipple. I'm a member of the Round Valley Indian Tribes. My apologies for my tardiness. I meant to be here on time and ran into some car troubles. But, just in response, I didn't hear all of the conversations, but, I just do want to respond to Mr. Russ's comment, talking about the raising of the Coyote Valley Dam. And I just want to, obviously I speak on my own behalf, not on my tribe, but I am a tribal member who has a voice and as anybody else does in this matter. And I think, given the fact that in the just recently, we seen that, there was a case where the Russian River had, we're looking at, didn't really take the time to look at pumping, here and is now in another appeals court. And thinking back to, what it looks like to actually raise Coyote Valley Dam. And my concerns are really about the tribal interests that are there. I mean, I understand that we had agreed to and committed to a water agreement or water diversion, and I appreciate the fact that we have shortened that length of time of 30 years versus 50 to kind of support weaning off the Russian River from the Eel River resources. But I really would like to consider all of the effects of all of the fish and all of the things that happen with the storage. When we create more storage, we create more DO. And right now we're experiencing tons of loss of fish and creating all these cyanobacterias, which are really harmful. I've been traveling on the Eel River back and forth, and right now my question is, why are we not getting the flows that we have been fighting for? Every year we have to fight for our flows, and now, there's barely any water in the South Fork Eel, let alone in our area. And so I just really would like, for you to take the consideration of thinking really positively, taking a lot of time and effort to look at what it looks like to our water resources and water quality when we continue to store stagnant water. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one rise, I'll bring it back. And again, this was an informational item. We appreciate the information greatly. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for your comments. And I'm going to turn it back over to our general manager to go through item B5B, which is the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Rabbit. I'd like to invite up some colleagues who will help me with this report. Greg Gench, who's an engineer 4. He is the engineering project manager for the design of the new Eel-Russian facility. Jessica Martini-Lamb, who is the division manager for environmental resources for Sonoma Water. She is managing the CEQA process. And Stuart Tiffin, Sonoma Water's public information officer, who is managing communications for IRPA. I will start off, and if maybe we can get the presentation back, I'll try to share. Let's hopefully this works. Success. Okay. Aha. All right. Very good. Before we launch into Greg's presentation, I wanted to give you an update of some work that we will bring back as a more complete report sometime this fall, early winter. And that is the business model development for the new Eel-Russian facility. We're calling it the revenue strategy for the NERF. The goal of that strategy is to determine feasible approaches to pay for capital costs, bond financing costs, ongoing maintenance and operation costs for the NERF, and the debt repayment period based on a beneficiary's pays principle. And we have a consultant, Jacobs Engineering, who's helping us in the first phase of this work. It is a 2-phased effort. Some of the tasks in this initial phase that, again, we'll bring back to you as a report and a presentation include establishing a funding baseline, a current understanding of the costs of constructing and operating the NERF, a list of beneficiaries, both direct and indirect beneficiaries of the water that's stored in Lake Mendocino, of the water that's diverted through the NERF. A variety of revenue approaches. We're hoping that we can summarize the funding needs, the potential beneficiaries, these revenue approaches, and evaluate some scenarios for the next phase. And we're trying to winnow down the universe of potential ways that we can account for these annual operating costs of NERF and pay for the debt financing that will be required to offset the expense of constructing the NERF, which is currently pegged at $50 million. Next slide will show you a little bit of what our upcoming revenue strategy schedule is. Right now, we're working on, and with the consultant and a technical advisory group that's composed of members of Sonoma Water's customers. Some of them are here today, as well as representatives of the community from Inland Water and Power Commission, Mendocino Inland Water and Power Commission. 6 folks helping us look through these materials prepared by the consultant, and we've had 4 or 5 productive meetings to date. We're going to complete a draft paper and presentation. It will be reviewed over the month of September. In October, for the second phase of work, we're going to issue a request for qualifications and then select that consultant and initiate the second phase of work while we prepare for the next IRPA meeting in the November-December timeframe, where we'll present this initial round of revenue strategy work, and looking forward to taking that next phase and really putting some numbers to this business plan. This is very qualitative at the phase we're at right now. We hope to quantify some of the opportunities, the costs, and how each beneficiary will directly benefit from the water that's diverted through the NERF. Just a very brief update on that. Another thing that I did not include a slide on, and we touched on it in the previous comments, are IRPA's response to scoping document number 1 that FERC released. That's up on the FERC docket. We made some comments that are very much in line with what the IRPA board has determined the path forward to be, and that's to stay the course in negotiating with PG&E, upholding the terms of the water diversion agreement with our partners, and making forward progress on developing the NERF. And what we're going to hear today is evidence of some of that progress from my colleagues. This money that we're using to do this is partly from this California Department of Fish and Wildlife grant, as well as a $2 million grant from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And with that, I will turn it over to Greg. I'm happy to take questions about that initial piece, or we can take questions after we're through with this entire director's report. Chair Rabbit, that is your discretion.
I think we're good.
Very good. So I'll turn it over to Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Gensham, the project manager at Sonoma Water for the design components of the NERF project. And I just have a few slides to go over where we are with design and the general components of the project. We have a 30% design for the 2 project components, which is the diversion structure, which replaces the current, what's the pump station, which replaces the current diversion structure up in Lake Van Arsdale. And then the other component is the removal of a turbine in the powerhouse and replacement of that with an energy dissipator. So now we're working on taking that 30% design, which actually went through some iterations, and we did an alternatives analysis and selected the alternative that we're talking about. We're taking that to 60%, and it's a design firm called McMillan, who's done the 30% design, and now they're working on the 60, and it's underway. We're expecting the design to be completed, this fall or Q2, the end of Q2. Right now, they're doing field work. They've just done a lot of topography surveys, and they're in the water right now they did bathymetry, and now they're doing some drilling to characterize the sediments and the depth of bedrock so that they know what's going to be released and what we can expect to see in front of the screens of the pump station and things like that. So it took a little longer than we had hoped. They were supposed to be doing this field work over the prior summer, but because of NEPA requirements due to USBR's involvement. It took longer and FERC involvement. So next, they're going to process these studies, do the modeling, model sediment transport that's going to occur when dams are removed, and then after that, and use that to inform the final design, which will be the final 60%. And that's designed for both the pump station and also the changes at the powerhouse. So, and then after that is submitted, or maybe before that's fully submitted, I don't know at what point we're going to solicit for a consultant to do the 60 to 99% design phase. But we will be hiring a consultant to do that. That's the next step. And that would be targeted to start in 2027 and finish toward the end of 2028. And then bidding an award, I think that's pretty, hard to characterize right now. There's so many things that have to happen, and it has to occur in line with PG&E removing the dams, both Scott and Lake Van Arsdale. So go to the next slide. So here's the turbine that is going to be removed, and that's where the water, will be flowing down through. It's going to be replaced with an energy dissipation valve because there's hundreds of feet of head on the water that comes through this diversion up at Lake Van Arsdale, and that without a turbine there to dissipate all that energy, something is needed. So this is like a vortex energy dissipator that takes that energy and converts it to turbulence and dissipates it so that it doesn't come out so strongly into the tail race. And here's a graphic showing the current infrastructures, the structures that are there. You can see Cape Horn Dam in the top, and then below that there's a fish exclusion barrier and a fish hotel to the left. And you can see the fish ladder that goes up and then back around to the top of the dam. And then in the lower left, there is the diversion, which basically is gates and a fish screen and a debris screen and other things like that. And that operates at the water level that the dam maintains. So the dam, a portion of the dam is going to be removed. You can see that to the right. It's the stair step structure at the top, right? And the diversion is going to partly stay in place, but all the mechanical infrastructure that's in it with the screens and the fish screens and the debris screens and the gates are all going to be removed. And we'll see in the next slide a little bit more what that'll look like. And then the fish exclusion barrier, which is just below the dam, is the lower right. And that just keeps fish from going up and beating their heads against the dam. And instead, they're forced into the fish hotel and the fish ladder, and they come up through that structure. So all that stuff's going to be removed and replaced with this naturalized section through there. It's going to be a lower dam section. And then the pump house is in green there. That's the little green building. And there'll be a series of large, high capacity pumps in there. I think 6, if I remember, but they will pump from subsurface and pull the water and then take it down that green arrow that there'll be underground pipe below that slope. And it'll discharge into what is now sort of the channel that feeds into the diversion, the current existing diversion. And that channel, that forebay in that channel will serve as kind of a buffer zone to balance the flow down the diversion with the flow that's allowed through the energy dissipator at the tail race. And it is through the interaction with the pumps pumping water into this reservoir here, which flows down the pipes into the energy dissipation valve. And what comes out, that'll balance the water allowed to be diverted based on the water diversion agreement and what's in the river and the target flows that are necessary at the downstream end into Potter Valley. So, and then here's just a quick picture of the drilling that's occurring right now in Lake Van Arsdale. After a lot of work getting through the NEPA process, they're finally doing it. So it's a company called DrillX, and they're doing corings in the water down, in some cases, all the way into bedrock, where it's important to know for the structure installations. And then they're actually collecting samples that PG&E is going to make use of as well in the information that they need. And they're also doing test pits in some gravel bars that are upstream of here to also characterize the sediment that's going to be discharged when the dam is removed. And McMillan's going to be modeling that as soon as they get the data from this investigation. I think that's all I have.
That photo was taken 2 days ago, so that crew will be out in the reservoir for the better part of this month. And a thanks to Greg and to Jessica for helping with all the permitting for that activity. It took quite a long time to get the permissions from myriad regulatory agencies to be able to do that critical work. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Jessica Martini-Lamb to talk a little bit about the CEQA process that's now underway.
Good afternoon. I'll start with just a brief refresher on the CEQA process for NERF. As you all are aware, California Environmental Quality Act compliance is required of public agencies that are approving or carrying out discretionary projects that have potential for impact to the environment. And so in this case, ERPA is going to be acting as CEQA lead agency in preparing an environmental impact report that will cover the NERF's project's construction, operation, and maintenance. And the EIR process will afford multiple opportunities for public input throughout its preparation. And we expect that the timeline for preparing the EIR and bringing it to the board for final approval is about 24 months. Go to the next slide. So our consultant, Environmental Science Associates, has officially kicked off their work under the agreement that we have with them to begin preparation of the EIR. That work initiated on May 1st. And currently we are working on very early stages of what we're calling project concepts. So starting to develop initial project objectives and the range of alternatives that may be considered in the environmental impact report, as well as establishing the baseline that the proposed project will be compared to, and the cumulative projects that may be considered in the environmental impact report. ESA submitted a request for information to ERPA staff. So we're gathering the available information that they will need to inform their CEQA analyses. And then we are starting to work on planning for the notice of preparation and public scoping process that we plan to start this late fall of this calendar year. So the anticipated milestones for the environmental impact report are listed here, and these are also sort of the key points of public process. So as I mentioned, the notice of preparation and CEQA scoping, we anticipate to happen late fall of this calendar year. And then the draft environmental impact report would be available for public comment and review late fall in 2027, with the final environmental impact report anticipated to come back to the board in the summer of 2028. And ESA is contracted to assist ERPA with preparation of our regulatory permits for construction, operation, and maintenance of NERF. And that approval of those state permits will rely on the environmental impact report that's being prepared. So those permit applications are likely be submitted to the resource agencies around the time that the environmental impact report is approved by the board. And that concludes my update.
Thank you, Jessica. Next, we'll move to Stuart Tiffin, our PIO, who certainly will help with some of the public outreach that's a part of the CEQA process, but we have other efforts afoot as well. Stuart.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Stuart Tiffin, Public Information Officer with Sonoma Water. In our communications work for ERPA has focused on providing clear, factual information about the Eel-Russian Project Authority and the new Eel-Russian facility. We've developed and keep updated fact sheets, which include descriptions of the project and infographics. We continue to produce new content for the website. In addition, we've responded to frequent media inquiries and supported board members with talking points and media responses. We've provided interviews to reporters from a variety of local, regional, and national news outlets. In June, ERPA launched its social media presence on Facebook and Instagram and began running ads that help define ERPA's role and direct people to eelrussianauthority.org, connecting them with project updates and the fact sheets. That campaign has resulted in more than a 500% increase in website traffic, from fewer than 500 visits a month to almost 3,000. So we're considering that to be quite effective so far. Our next step is preparing for the CEQA scoping process this winter. And those communications will focus on helping people understand how the meetings will work, how they can participate, and the importance of hearing from a broad range of communities and interests. And those are the updates for communications.
And that concludes the director's report, Chair Abbott.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for the work, and thank you for that presentation. And I'll look to my colleagues if there's any questions on anything that you've heard. Not seeing any. Again, thank you. Thank you for all the work. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on this particular item? Again, thanking you for not rising. We'll bring it back and move on then to public comment on items not listed on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the body? Bodies. I got in trouble with that one. And I'll look to my colleagues if there's any board member announcements. Please.
I don't have a specific announcement, but I'd like to request, because sometimes people aren't getting the information I think that they should have. In some cases, that's our fault for not doing it systematically. I would like to see if we could do more of these meetings, perhaps. I think we're getting to a place where a lot of information is being gathered and finalized. And you can see that from the reports that you've heard today. There's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes every single day with staff and a lot of us. I think it behooves us to get that information out to the public as we can. And I'd like to encourage us to try and do more of that public outreach.
Getting a lot of head nods up this way. We'll leave it to staff to work that one in, and appreciate the comment. Anyone else have anything for the good of the order?
I actually have a question.
Please.
I was going to ask this gentleman right here. The two things that you mentioned on in your presentation was the pump stations being looked at, and then the powerhouse and that piece of equipment that was being taken out. So PG&E, that's PG&E's powerhouse, and they're taking that out, right?
I think anything that needs to be done that PG&E wouldn't otherwise have to do with their closure, decommissioning, will be part of the NERF construction project. So we'll be taking that out and replacing it with this energy dissipator.
I guess that was the basis of my question, was like, whose authority or whose responsibility is that to be taken out? But I think PG&E just wants to walk away with as little as possible.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me like that would be their responsibility. I don't know how we determine that. So I got David has all the answers, so he's gonna have to.
We are engaged in a business negotiation with PG&E over things just like that. So lands, water rights, facilities that are needed. What stays, what goes. I think we haven't gotten to the point of determining exactly who removes what, when. But I think Greg's presumption is right. If PG&E were able to leave something in place and walk away from it, as opposed to expending the money to remove it, an old piece of equipment most likely falls to ERPA to remove that piece of equipment and replace it. But there's a relatively small proportion of the infrastructure that ERPA needs from PG&E. The vast majority of that infrastructure is something that NERF does not need to continue operating. And we have identified those pieces that we absolutely need. And that there's a list of those items in the license surrender application. And we continue to work with PG&E to refine our understanding of who's responsible for their disposition.
I think that was my assumption, not his, that PG needs to walk away with as little as responsibility as possible, and also having to pay for whatever. So I know they finally came out with their assets, list of assets. We've been asking them that question for probably at least 3 years now, but they just kept saying, no, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So, but we'll get there. So now I think we're here when that purchase and sales agreement discussion happens. But anyway, so that's why I was wondering, like, how is that kind of like basically divided up? So it sounds like it's in process right now.
Yeah, that's part of the negotiations that are going to occur for the next 2 years.
And then just one last little question about that. So you mentioned that the energy that was involved with, I think that's a term you used.
Yeah.
So they haven't been working now for 3 or 4 years now. So what energy is being replaced in there?
So right now, if I can answer that, there's a relatively modest volume of water that's being released. We'd like to maximize the diversion capacity of the tunnel to 300 cubic feet per second. In order to do that, we have to find a way to discharge that energy. So the design accommodates the full diversion capacity of the tunnel and the pumps that we'll be installing. So right now they're bypassing a smaller volume of water.
So I mean, but that's part of what I'm sorry, I don't mean to prolong all this, but so that's what's being worked on now by ERPA. The ERPA will be looking into that. But because they haven't been running for 3 years and generating power, like what's happening with that now?
There is a bypass pipe right now that has an energy dissipation valve on it. Its volume is restricted. So it can't pass the 300 CFS that we would like to be able to operate through the NERF. So one exists in the existing infrastructure, but it's only for when maintenance was being done to the turbines, for example. So we're going to beef up the capacity so we can divert as if the turbines were there through this new piece of equipment.
And the existing one will stay also. So there'll be 2 once the project is implemented, the lower capacity one that's in place plus the newer, larger one that will be installed. And they'll be able to use those in conjunction to help balance flows together.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful for me to understand that.
I think we should take a nice picture when we hand over our core sample analysis from the work that's going on right now to PG&E to remind them of the cooperation and everything else. But I appreciate that and understand what everything is negotiable. And I think your summary is probably correct, but good luck. And thank you again for the work. With that, it does bring us to the end of our meeting. And again, thank everyone for being here. Thank you for attending. For all the work, staff, and our next meeting is in the November, December timeframe, as I heard earlier. So until then, thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.